Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with a great friend. It's a great honor that he was able to take some time. But
my pleasure.
Friend, he's a amazing mixing engineer, recording producer. He's recorded Sergio Mendes, Antonio Carlos Jobim, Caetano Veloso, Lindsay Gilberto, Ray Charles, Sarah Vaughan, Luis Miguel. I mean, you name it. He's done it all. He's got 5 Latin Grammys, 2 Grammys, I think, if I count well, 2 Emmys. Anyway, this guy is a legend, and it's a real honor and pleasure to have him here.
Thank you.
Share a little bit of his journey in the music industry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me there. You know, hopefully sooner than later, I'll be able to visit that corner of the planet that I've never been, but it's been always in my bucket list. So
it would be amazing. It would be amazing to have you here for sure.
Yeah, very cool.
So maybe, I mean, for the people that are going to be seeing this, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what brought you to where you're now? Just kind of a quick kind of summary of I know it's many years, but yeah, just if you can get us an idea of what your journey has been.
I essentially am a musician. I'm a drummer. That's how it started. And very early, I think my first band, I was 14 years old. And very soon I realized that my band sucked. And I was not going to be able to survive with my band. And so I had to find an alternative to make my living. And because being a drummer and having very good rhythm, at least I thought I had. So I thought, and having a good musical sense too, I became a DJ, but not the format of DJ that we known from today. I was an entertainer. So what I do is I work in the club, and you have to play music and make sure that people will be on the floor dancing and having a good time. And also stopping to drink, otherwise you'll be fired. Either because they are not having a good time, or either because they are visiting the bar. So you had to balance and make sure that the floor. And so that was one thing that where I really started to pay attention to the inner guts of the music that I was dealing with and what made it. And this was even before disco music. Disco music came maybe 2 or 3 years later, where it was a format that was used in clubs and stuff. Before, you just had to find good music that you would play and people would dance to it. It was not a specific trend of music. It was just like a feel good and let's go for the throat.
Of course.
So
this was in Rio, right? This was in Brazil.
In Brazil. That was 1972.
Oh, okay.
I was a minor. I was a minor DJ, very rare to happen. I think 16 when I started. I was yes, walking through back doors and stuff. But then, because of having this affair with music, relationship with music, I was very fortunate to. I was a good dancer too, so I was always playing stuff that I wanted to be, which, by the way, is the same philosophy that I use on my records nowadays. I do stuff that I feel good about it, because that's the only way to go. When you try to get out of your way, I know we're going to talk about that later, but I already used the same philosophy there. So I just say, what if I was on the floor? What kind of stuff I would like to dance to right now? And then I will go and dig the music. And those were turntables. And by the way, those are the days that there were no mixers.
Okay.
Mixers didn't exist. It just happened that a close friend of mine, Braga, he was an electronic genius, and he designed for me a 2-pot mixer for turntable. Yeah. Left. That's it. That was it. Left, on, off, right on. Before it was a switch. So you have to put the needle and listen to the groove, and then you switch on the right beat.
Wow.
You know, it's really difficult, but it was a good exercise too. I loved every minute of it. So with the mixer, then I started to be very creative, because now I'm mixing one music within another, which is not what one. When you talk about mixers nowadays, you have a mixer on your iPhone. No. Back then, it didn't exist anything similar. There was no references. There was nothing. You know, back then, obviously, information took forever to travel.
Of course.
So, and that's how I started. Until it got to the point that I said, listen, I really want to put my hands more and more and more and more and more in music. So I started working into visiting, not working so much, but visiting a studio. And then I said, well, no, I got to really, this is what I want to do. So then I moved to LA.
Okay. And how did you do that jump to LA? Because I think a lot of people, it's something that a lot of people do, but at the same time, a lot of people dream with doing that. So how was that transition from going from a country like Brazil and going to LA?
Well, for me, it was my dream to begin with. And when it's your dream, nothing stops you. At least that's my philosophy. You got to chase your dreams. Otherwise you'll be frustrated your whole life, not trying at least, right?
Of course.
It doesn't mean that you have to succeed in what you want to do. You hope so. But if you don't try, you're never going to succeed. So that was the first thing. As I got here in LA, immediately, remember that I mentioned this whole thing started before disco music. Then came disco music. So when I landed in LA, it was exactly when disco music folded away, went down. So like 2,000 studios in LA alone were closed. I mean, people out of work. So I have to deliver sandwiches to make my living, because I have my wife and my 2-year-old son, which I landed in LA exactly on his second birthday. Wow. And to pursue a career in what I believe, and not to stretch too much the story, I ended up finding a gig at one of the best studios in the world at that time. And even if it was here today, it would still be called Camden Recorders. And I was fortunate enough to be around sessions with Quincy Jones, Bruce Swedien, and REO Speedwagon, Rufus the Chaka Khan, and you name it, because the studio was a line outside of people trying to get in. It was a prime place, just out of curiosity. Camden Recorders was the first studio in America that purchased 3 SSL consoles, the first 3 that got in America.
Wow.
Which might not, I was never a big fan of SSL. I was always a Neve guy, even though I made many good records on SSL, and I like the new generation of consoles. But the reason why I'm mentioning is because back in those days, automation was a 64K Ellison. So SSL was the company that developed a time code based automation. So you can do endless number of passes and your moves will not be delayed according to the music. And that was it. And then I worked there for several months. Very soon, I started there as a gopher. Do you know what a gopher is in the studio, Gael?
You go get something. You're a runner, basically.
Yeah, gopher, is the worst job you can get in the studio. Worse. It's the bottom one. And then I moved from gopher to runner, and then from runner to assistant, second assistant, first assistant, second engineer, and then I was hired as a staff engineer because I was having a good relationship with artists that were working there, and off I went.
Which was the artist that kind of was your breaking point, so to speak, when you moved to LA? Which was that artist that really helped you kind of open up and people started seeing you like as an engineer to go to?
Well, there's two versions of that. The first version was for me the first artist that I ever worked here doing his album was a guy called Barry Maguire. He was the composer of Eve of Destruction, and he became Christian, and that was my last session as assistant engineer and my first session as an engineer, because they fired the engineer halfway through.
That's the common story, right? It's like the guy gets fired,
Yeah.
it doesn't show up, or and there's a lot to be said, I think, to be ready to step up when that happens, right?
Yeah, but this is, well, not today. Next time we do this, I'm going to describe to you the conditions in which happened. It's pretty funny, but you take a lot of time. But next time I'll do it, or maybe in person. We'll be fine. So that was it. But then I moved right after that. I moved back to Brazil because I wanted to go back to my country and apply the knowledge that I was acquiring in the process into our local cultural musical movement there. And so I was then immediately hired by the major label, which had 4 studios, and we were the second biggest record company then. So, which was, for me, was a breaking point, because in 2 months I became the supervisor of the studios, and I had the clearance from my boss, the owner of the company, to do whatever it is that I want to do with the studios, and whatever musicians I could bring, whatever projects I wanted to do. So it was such a valuable experience, buying equipment and doing with limited resources, because importing stuff from Brazil was so out of reach and so expensive. But, having the chance to do 3 times in a row orchestra date and moving them around the studio to see which one it worked better for me. And,
so a great learning experience. A great learning experience, basically.
Oh, absolutely. So during that period, I worked with a lot of amazing artists, and I did incredible records, amazing records that I'm still so proud of it, and are really big in the market. But trying to answer your question regarding my breaking point here in America was the first time that I worked. It was not the first time that I worked with him, but the first time that I did a whole album with Sergio Mendes. And that album is called Brasileiro.
It's the one that was nominated, right?
Yes, we had 2 nominations. We won 1 Grammy. I was nominated as an engineer. It was actually my first nomination in 1992. It's a pretty extraordinary album musically and sonically, even though, if I could, I'll go back and remix the whole thing. But that is a disease. We'll all go back and remix everything that we haven't done. But it's a pretty outstanding musical experience. Well, the opening track of the album is 125 percussion players playing in the parking lot.
Wow. That
I have to go up the streets and put M50s and C12. I travel with a duffel bag with $200,000 worth of microphone to Brazil, because we needed to be in Brazil to track the album. And when I finally got a hold of the session, I said, well, they don't fit in the studio. So I have them. I took all the cars at the parking lot of Polygram. Then they had an amazing studio there, and I had all of them spread around, just like how they parade in a school samba. And we had people faking that there was a car accident and stopping traffic so the buses would not get in because of the noise. Things that you do for music, man. I look back at that, it's pretty outrageous to do something like this, but I think it was worth, because it's here,
Yeah.
30 years after.
Wow. And so in all these times, I mean, obviously you've had to develop many skills and many, many ways of doing things, but if you had to choose one single skill that has, allowed you to continue to get the calls, that has kept you in the room, what would you think that skill is?
Well, I think it's a skill that, quite honestly, you polish that skill, but that is within you. It's just like, first of all, how you perceive music. That's the number one thing. You must, if you don't love music to the bone, you're in the wrong business. Because we do what we do because we love music. That's the first thing. So if you walk in a session thinking how much money you're going to make, how long it's going to take, quite honestly, Go back. Don't even start, because it's pointless. You're going to waste your time to do that. So I think if I could describe a skill, it's not a skill, as I said, it's my love for music. You know, I love music. The one thing that I tell my friends, and I still remember back in the days when I was a drummer in a really horrible band, the pleasure that I have to go rehearse and carry the drums on my back and having to climb 3 flights of stairs to set it up and to be there and just to play a gig. That was the moment. It was something so special. I didn't care if we were going to get paid, if we were going to get robbed. It didn't matter. It was an in the zone moment. So I say that before you attempt to walk in the studio or to do anything with music, you just have to evaluate if you have enough love for that, because it requires a lot. That will be my answer for you.
And along these years, of course, you explored yourself by yourself a lot of the techniques and the things that you kind of came up, and from what I'm hearing, had to come up with things yourself. But I also know that you worked with many great other engineers and producers. So can you speak a little bit about who some of these have been? You consider your mentors, but also for people that are looking to be mentored, what do you think also help you cultivate those relationships and essentially be mentored by these people?
Well, I have to say, I had a couple of guys that were very important into how I used as a reference to the records and the recordings that I did. And I think it has to do with style. Certain producers, certain engineers, they have a stamp, so they have the thumbprint so incredibly strong. There are many in my list, many. But obviously, there is one that it jumps out, which is Bruce Swedien. And people know Bruce Swedien because of Michael Jackson. I know Bruce Swedien. Remember when I said in 1972 that I was a DJ? I noticed, and by the way, not only I was a DJ, but I worked assembling the sound system of the club. And I had this idea. The club was a kind of rectangular and benches all around on the table. So what I had one idea to have speakers underneath the benches all across, like 36. So it will be pretty musically. You'll be sitting and then thing would be hugging. The sound was like pretty incredible. So because I was always a very, very curious about sound and acoustics and all that, even though I had very little academic knowledge, but I had my feeling about it. So I noticed one record that every time I put that record, that my system in the club would sound amazing. I said, man, what is it about this 145 that makes this thing sound so good? And back in the days where, first of all, 45, you didn't have any sleeves, basically. You just have a small sleeve paper, which was common for all the record. So I had to write a letter. For most of you guys who don't even know what letter is. Letter is the paper you write it, I had to write a letter to the record company called Brunswick and ask them some more technical information about it. I was actually already aware of density of the vinyl, how many grams and all that. So I just wanted to find out to see if I could recreate on all the records that I played the same stuff. And then they sent me this, the song is called Or Girl by Shy Lights. 1972, they replied to me and said, listen, all we have is this. And the one information that was there, the engineer was Bruce Swedien. And then I started tracking stuff, which was so difficult. Imagine, nowadays, you cannot find credits for anything. You imagine 1972. And by the way, I'm in Brazil, so you have a giant ocean in between 2 points. But Bruce was my my mentor without knowing.
Sure.
And then I had the privilege to meet the guy and to be with him in a couple of his sessions. And then I absolutely fell in love. I was already a giant fan of his sound, of the way that he did things. They were very, my way of getting sounds and doing things were very similar in a philosophical aspect. How things sound, how big, stereo, all that, room mics and all that. I was already experimenting to that. That's why it called my attention. Now, I'm talking so much about Bruce, but there are many others, you know, Al Schmidt, Alan Sides, George Massenburg, Elliot China, our dear Ed Shirley. So many of those guys, they did such incredible work. But I think that was my turning point when I realized that required a lot more skills to do what I was expecting to get where I was expecting to get, just then bringing up a microphone and crossing your finger and say, let's go. No, you had to. And by the way, since then, I do one thing that I call critical listening. Mm-hmm. I listen at least half an hour of music every day, every single day. Critical listening, that's all. Just listen to very soft level, listening to music and trying to navigate through what is technically going on. Why is that instrument so deep into the mix? Why is that reverb working so musically well with this? Or why not? You know, sometimes it's not always a great thing. Sometimes you don't appreciate so much what you're hearing. So that was my main mentor. Now, there was a crossing point when I became a producer, actually signing as, you know, all the aspects of producing a record, bringing songs and tuning and determining keys and tempos and vibes and choosing arrangers and all that. I mean, I had learned for just about every producer that I worked with. And I got to tell you that half and half with all the producers, I did over 450 albums in my career. Not all of them as producers. I would say maybe 100 as producers and 350 as an engineer, which I still do. People still hire me just to mix. You know, when I'm in between albums and I can't do it, I would just mix or record something. Generally, I'm involved in my own productions, which they take a lot of time. But I learned what to do and I learned what not to do, which is I think learning what not to do is a more valuable lesson, because when you see that something doesn't work, and regardless what it is, either musically or regarding the vibe, the energy, the attitude, if you're away from that, you have the other half of alternatives that most likely they will work. It might not work for me, might work for you, might work for someone else. But when you know, at least, this is not the right thing to do, you save from that big mistake already.
Of course. And since you started producing, when you produce, do you typically end up doing the recording, the mixing, and even the mastering potentially yourself, or are you in a place where, as a producer, you find yourself sometimes saying, no, I'm going to let this, somebody else mix this, or you prefer to take the vision throughout the whole process?
Well, no, for me, it's a one package thing because of where I come from. I come from engineering. So for me, it's very difficult to relate to, and I attempted already, believe me, because when you're producing and doing the engineering, you're sitting in two chairs. Yeah. It takes you a couple more, twice as much work. So, but I never managed, most likely is one of my deficiencies. I never managed properly to tell another engineer what I wanted to get sonically with that element. I'm just saying that because I had, so many amazing engineer friends and people that I respect so much. It doesn't have anything to do or with them not being able to deliver. I think it has to do with me not being able to deliver my message across properly. The only thing that I don't do is mastering.
Okay.
Because for me, because I'm so involuntarily controlling of the project, and that it's a moment that I like to have another
pair of ears,
talent.
Another talent. I think that makes a lot of sense, because ultimately, having that last step be somebody that has fresh ears in the project, that hasn't been involved so much in the project, they're able to listen to the project in a different way. Maybe that you've gotten to a point where you've you produced it, you maybe even arranged it, you recorded it, you mixed it. By that point, there's certain things where you lose perspective, and in a way, when another pair of ears come in, they may catch things that you're not hearing anymore at that point, or paying attention to.
And one thing that is one of my personal rules too is, if you really want to turn me off in a session, regardless where it's coming from, and say, hey, can we do this music kind of like, I'm going to just shoot the name, like Coldplay? I said, man, that will be the only thing that we're not going to do now, because they did it so well. I just don't want to go and look like a fool trying to. So this is a unique business that we live from. So the reason what I'm saying that is, like, I cannot use reference from other people's life. I can't. It's just not what it is. You mixing, let's play something else. No. I'm mixing. This is my mix. This is the way I perceive it. And it works for me. And hopefully, and I've been very fortunate that my decisions have worked for a lot of people. It brought me a lot of happiness.
But in a way, with the critical listening that you do, you've built your own catalog of unconscious references, I guess, or conscious in some cases. But it's like, rather than pursuing a sound, you already kind of created in your mind a instinctive set of references, most likely.
Absolutely.
Where things need to be said.
But the good thing that I'm totally open is with my master engineers, and most of the time I use one only, is that because he's visiting so many different records and so many different projects. So I let him shoot the moon. Just go. Do what you think is necessary. This is a contemporary. Well, I said, this is a classic album. Can you bring down 3 dB? I don't want it to be that loud, But I'm letting him, without giving, listen, this has to sound like Imagine Dragons. No, I don't know. But if he feels like it, if he perceives that, and if he does it when he sends it back to me, as far as he doesn't tell me, if he doesn't tell me, I don't care. Obviously, if it was Imagine Dragon, I could tell that where he was going for. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that I let the mastering engineer, and I've been very fortunate, because the master engineer that I've been working for so many years now, I have only one problem with him, because he masters and sent me the record. By the time I'm listening, he said, "Hey, wait, stop, because I did something else. I found this new cable." And then when I'm halfway through, "Hey, wait, stop. No, because I just found out I'm going to put 3.3 dB and 22K on this new," and he has a Pacific microsound converter, which is an extraordinary piece of equipment. And one day, now I say, listen, I'm only going to start listening when you send me the 4th version. Then is when I'm going to start listening. So is that kind of astute, enthusiastic relationship, that, well, obviously he loves what I sent to him, and he's trying to pair up as much as possible. So I give him all the freedom, and I make the judgment with fresh ears. Nope, I don't. Pull back. I have this line that I use all the time that should be valuable for everyone that is listening to this, which is, you know what? It was better when it was worse. So go back, because now you think you're improving. And one thing about this too, and I, for many years, 25 years, I think, almost exclusively mastered my albums with Bernie Grunman. he's not the one that I've been using now, even though I just did Sergio Mendes' album, and the new one that I mixed, and I did Nathan East album with him as well. But Bernie has a very intelligent line that says, be careful not to be intoxicated with technology. And that is very, very important, because it's not because you read an article on Mix Magazine that this converter is the best thing in the world that it is. It has to sound like that for you, regardless of other people's opinion. So listen, put it up. Listen, if it hits you, goes. If it doesn't, it doesn't matter. If Bruce Redeem, Moogie, Gael was used, it doesn't matter. You have to be truthful to your sensors, you know.
I like to go a step further and kind of along those lines, which is, it's not so much about which tools you use, it's more what you do with them.
Yeah.
And in a way, this discussion always comes like, well, these speakers are so much better than these ones, or this console, or this plugin, or this or that. And then ultimately it's okay, well, that's great. And of course, after a certain threshold of quality, right? When you're talking about professional equipment, it's not so much about which piece of equipment, but more how are you using it, and how are you making the best out of what you have in terms of equipment. Because,
absolutely. Absolutely. As I said to you, when I was in Brazil working, even though it was a top of the game studio in Brazil, but obviously it would not compare to the studios in LA with the kind of microphones and outboards and preamps, everything that we had compared to here. And I listened to albums that I did. Actually, a couple of days ago, I heard one and I said, man, how did I pull this out? You know, I didn't have available for me none of my most essential tools that I need today. And still, I listen to the album and I enjoy it to the point that I say, sonically, I reached where I wanted to take the project. Maybe if I had more tools available, I would have not taken to where it is so well right now, because that's another thing too. You know, it's just like our business has a lot to do with cooking, right? You know, you're going to do you have this amazing fish, and you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to use Himalaya, salt from the Himalaya. If you put too much, you destroy the same way. It doesn't matter whether it's the best, or it really doesn't, you know, your balance is what it's going to make it. And for that matter, two things, you know, my first Grammy nomination, Sergio, the first 4 songs on the album, they were rough mixes. I never mixed it. They didn't let me mix. The record company called me and said, nope, you're not going to touch this. It's done. And oddly enough, my first American Grammy with João Gilberto, it was all rough mixes. I mixed it, and he convinced me that the rough mixes were so much better than the mixes. And at that time, I was kind of upset. But after I realized that he was right, the only problem that I had with that, because I did the rough mixes, it was like 5 a.m. And when I hear now, I can hear the reverb is a little left heavy. And that bugs me quite a bit, because it was just 5 a.m. and on tape, it was just, you know, doing the whole album in 2 hours. Or maybe not even that, an hour. Very difficult mutes and all that. But, you know, and him next to me, and now I listen back, there's a couple. But even that is part of the game, you know. It's something that I listen to, and I remember the amazing time that I had doing the album.
So talking about equipment and stuff, how much do you still get to do work on tape these days? And then the next question is, maybe can you very briefly talk about what your mixing setup looks like these days?
Okay, what was your first question? Because you broke up.
How often do you still get to work with tape?
Oh, I just don't.
You don't? Okay.
No, I vanished. I was the last one to become digital. I guarantee you, nobody else. I was on tape, multi-track tape for a long, long, long time. And then I was hired to produce a soundtrack album for a movie, and they sent me all the files. And it required a lot of editing, a lot of inner changes that I had to do. That is the producer, not the engineer. I said, listen, this ain't gonna work. And I said, okay, I bought a Pro Tools, a full rig, then locked myself in the studio. I didn't have a studio then, I had a room. I locked myself in for a week until I could understand how the whole process, operational wise, worked, because I was not generating any stuff. I was editing, just understanding. Then after that, I start experimenting with, instead of recording with tape, to record into Pro Tools. And I remember for a long time I had half and half. Like, for instance, I would do tracks on Pro Tools and then I'll do orchestra on tape and back and forth. Until the day that, and even back then, I already had my master clock with stuff that people say, come on, man, this is a clock. What difference that makes? For me, it always made a big difference sonically. I could hear it, and it's one of the best investments you can possibly do, because it really creates a very comfortable recording when you listen to. I mean, all the grain certainly starts to disappear. But I was mixing half-inch, 15 IPS SR. One day I decided not to, because the problem that I had now is that I will mix my album and I'll send for mastering. And when I sent for mastering, it was the first time that I will be converted from analog to digital. When they sent me back and I'll listen, say, oh, whose album is this? And I said, well, and I was so fussy about this because I used SR as a noise reduction, because I always loved SR. And I had my own set of SRs, and SRs, you can only encode or decode. It doesn't encode and decode at the same time. So I have a pair of cards going into the machine and a pair of cards going out of the machine. And even during mixing, even without printing, I'll be listening through the machine input just to be in contact with the artifact of the whatever black box you put in between your bus. So I will never live to print and then never come back. And I remember Alan Sides, which is one of the engineers that I respect the most, he was the owner of Ocean Way, extraordinary man. And I was mixing in his studio, and he came and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, that's what I do. I live encode and decode the machine input, and I listen to the machine." He said, "Man, what a great idea, because I always hate when I listen to my mixes back through SR using the same configuration." Yeah. And I said, "Try this out." So many times he would call me, "Man, you saved me. Now I can enjoy and adapt the mix." Okay. After a certain point, I stopped using analog because I just couldn't relate to the records anymore. They would be sent to mastering, and then it would take me a long time to adjust mastering. I was a pain in the butt, man. Calling Bernie, change this on bar 16. I'm hearing a clunch on the low end, on and on and on and on. And then I say, okay, fine. So I mixed back into Pro Tools, and was the best thing that I can possibly do. I could not care less for tape, zero. And the reason why I say that is that it's a big distance. When you live on an analog universe, if I know that the record that I'm doing is going to remain an analog domain up to the vinyl, perfect, great. It's not a better sounding way to record. It doesn't exist. But that's not what life is. That's not how it goes. By the way, there is not even such a thing as an analog recording anymore. Even the vinyls that people buy nowadays, they are being pressed or cutted on the mastering labs from a digital master. So the thing of the sequencing, and this is a topic that's quite interesting, because I gotta say that half of the records that I did, they were analog, 100% analog, and for vinyl. And there was a huge technical approach of how to assemble which songs would be the first, which would be the last, because of inner groove speed, a whole bunch of technical things that you learn. Remember when I said in the back, I was able to do things with the record company that I was then the director after a certain point that nobody ever dared to do. And by the way, mastering, it was an industrial process. They would just put, okay, how long is table? And I said, nope, that's not working. We gotta improve. We gotta make sure we gotta change the LPI, and But that was because I have the leverage, because we were a big record company, and I can do anything I wanted. On the benefit of the music, obviously, it was not self-indulgent. No, it was a little bit of self-indulgent too. Yeah, but it was mainly representing my record company.
Of course. And these days, you're so pretty much mixing in the box, or are you're using a console?
No. I am 100% analog.
Okay.
I have 3 semi mixes that I use, and I have 6 different converters. Each converter has its own unique sonic aspect. I have Lynxes, I have 192s, I have Swiss Sonics, I have Apogees, and I have everything is analog in my universe. I just mix everything into. I for the last couple of years, only maybe a year and a half, I started to use some plugins, not as a foundation. Next session we do, I will show you my setup so you can understand. So even my effects are most of them are analog. My reverb's analog, Berklee, Lexicon, and Yamahas, and all goes into a giant semi mix with no transformers into my 3 8816 Neve semi mixes, and with no transformers whatsoever, bypassing the output stage. I have no level control, everything that I could take it down, and I get off. The only thing that I don't use anymore is console. And the reason why I don't, it's because I noticed about 3 years ago, maybe even more than that, that by the time I came to mix, I had made so many decisions in side Pro Tools already, level-wise, and mutes and changes and splits and all that, that will be impossible to recreate them through a pair of faders. So then I said, well, if I'm not going to use the faders, why put a console in between my signal? So I have the shortest possible path, because behind my patch bay and my semi mixes are my converters. So, and my monitor is extended. My TV monitor is the only thing that is far away is my TV monitor to my computer. Everything else is about 3 feet distance. So that alone, I avoided miles and miles and miles and miles of cables. So I'm 100% analog, and I just can't live. And just about every record that I do, one way or another, I will do some sort of a reference rough in the box, because it's the fastest way to do it. But when I come back mixing, and then I get to, just Unity Gain, just opening through my system and listening, I said, I'm constantly comparing. And that is obviously, I'm saying, because this is my personal taste, and I can do that. So it doesn't mean that one doesn't have an analog, of course, chain. Can I do? You can do a great record on a laptop and a phone.
So you're doing all your level rights inside of the computer, but you're processing everything outside. So equalization, everything outside. Interesting.
EQ and a lot of my delays and reverbs, everything is analog. Now, and this has to do with the way they sound. That's why you choose a different microphone, and that's why you choose a different delay, and you use for this, and a different reverb is the way they sound, or how I perceive it, how they sound. Yeah. You see, and then one thing that because my root, my structure is all analog, when I approach the digital universe, I expect to hear something that will be within the same universe that the foundation of my work is. And that also helps because it gives me better judgment of what plugin to use, what else to do, print, spread them a little bit, do some, because you want to hear, that's how it is, how you perceive things. You want to hear it the way you want to hear it, The only thing, there is one thing that I got to tell you that I miss about analog. One thing.
What is it?
Well, especially in the days that, back in the days in the studio that you will be dealing with projects and, you'll be working with an artist for 3-4 days and then you will be on rotation, it will be a different artist. And, it's like something that you didn't have much involvement. Some of them you start from the beginning, some of them you would just jump in. But I remember when I was switching songs, analog days, I'll start a song and I'll get a mix going. The first thing we had to do is cross-patch stuff, put the kick on one and snare on two and the bass, whatever comfortable diagram on the console you want to start with to start working. So when the mix was ready, done, I'll say, okay, let's move to the next song. A lot of times the way things were recorded on tape on the next song had nothing to do with the first. So I'll never let my assistant touch anything. They would just put up the tape and I would play it and I would listen. Because sometimes now the kick drum is going what it was coming up, what it was the vocal change on the previous song. And whatever effect that I was doing, it could have been amazing for that one song. And that I would never experience that if it wasn't by a provoked accident. Because I would wait until things that I'll say, wow, man, check the sound of the kick drum. I'm going to just delay it. It might not be something to be throughout the whole song, but it would be something in a certain moment could be used. I would never have experienced that if it wasn't for analog. It's pretty sad to say that, but it's the only thing that I miss about analog, quite honestly.
Great. Well, we're slowly running out of time now, but one last question would be, if you had to give advice to young people that are wanting to get into the industry, what would that be? I think you've spoken already about some of those things, but just if you want to leave.
Well, the first, number one, most importantly, considering that you already realized that you're supposed to be in that business, that I'm not going to address that anymore because we talked about it, is, first of all, very careful with your ears. Very, very careful. It's good, it's rewarding, it feels good to listen loud, but the consequences are devastating.
Yeah.
Once you hurt your membrane, it will never come back, and you're going to impair you to exercise your trade. So, very, very important. If you're going to a concert, stay away from the big speakers because people have a tendency of blasting way too loud.
Yeah.
If you don't have your earplugs with you, ask for people around for a cigarette. Take the filter and put the filter. It's not about 12 dB reduction, but it's 12 dB less, then you're going to expose your membrane. And if it's too loud, get out of there. You can't afford to lose your most important tool. Because if you can hear it well, you cannot make any judgment. That's the number one. And then the philosophical aspect is don't ever walk in this profession thinking about the rewards. The rewards are consequence. They will come to you. If you deserve it, you have to deserve it. But don't ever think of, what should I do to become famous or to become rich and stuff. That is the fastest way for you to be kicked out of the business. You're not going to get anywhere. Those are the two most important. That's
I profoundly agree with that, and that's I think that's a pearl of an advice. Certainly, so many people are concerned about what the end price is, and they lose track of really why they're doing it and why they should actually be doing it, which goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is a love for music, rather than just fame or money or whatever you're going to get out of it, which is just a consequence. So yeah, that's great. So I'm going to do one last thing that I know you've seen me done before, which is I'll ask you 10 questions really quickly. And you just got to answer with one word, whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
And just a little game to wrap this all up. Digital or analog?
Analog, of course.
Caetano Veloso.
Oh man, my idol.
Música sertaneja.
I did, well, I can't be one word. I'm sorry, man. Because I respect any form of music, and I was privileged enough to work with a couple of amazing projects. One day I'll give you to listen. I love them, but in my perception.
Okay. Luis Miguel.
Extraordinary, best singer live.
Michael Jackson.
Well, Michael Jackson was the king of pop, and he deserved every bit of it.
Jazz.
Extraordinary. I grew up with it, not knowing which is the best.
Hardware versus plugins.
Hardware.
Picanha or hamburgers?
Picanha.
Streaming platforms.
Well, that's the way to go. There's no other way now.
And Rio de Janeiro or Los Angeles?
Oh, man. Well, I'm going to answer now with using one word, Los Angeles. But I'm going to ask you to ask me this question again next time. Maybe I would change.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Moogie, for the time. This was very insightful. And I'm sure that people watching this right now will get a lot of it. Thanks again. And
you're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
No, thank you. And everybody watching, stay tuned. There will be more of these. And if you want to, check out Moogie's music, it's really informative. And I think kind of a homework for everybody. And what I take personally of it is to be more diligent with my critical listening and actually spend more time doing that. So there you go. Thank you, everybody. And
thank you, guys.
Yeah. Bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.